The Fukushima tragedy showed how fragile the existence of all mankind on the planet is. The power of atomic energy is exploding and posing a threat to the planet. No sooner had the catastrophe died down than a new threat to the entire globe emerged. It comes from the largest nuclear waste repository in the United States. The measures to eliminate the source of irradiation were taken urgently, but the people from the neighboring regions were not informed about what had happened. About 9,000 people were rushed to clean up the disaster. In spite of the fact that there was a report of no threat, an emergency operations unit was urgently raised to its feet. More than 1,000 people were trapped in a de-energized tunnel with no way out. The vortex over the poisonous Klondike is getting larger and larger, which could lead to a colossal release of toxic substances into the water and atmosphere. There has been a major nuclear accident in the United States. The cause is due to improper storage conditions for waste that emits radiation. The catastrophe occurred in Hanford, Washington state. It traces its history back to 1943. A nuclear reactor appeared in this region. Its plutonium became the stuffing for the Fat Man bomb that exploded over the city of Nagasaki in 1945. But before that point, there had been tests at the Alamogordo test site. In its heyday, the facility operated 9 reactors simultaneously, producing 80% of the country's weapons-grade plutonium. That was more than 60 tons per year. To this day, 6 out of 8 warheads contain plutonium from Hanford. Location of the complex. Formed for the practical implementation of nuclear theories, the complex has modernized into a huge production facility spread over 1,740 kilometers squared. The area is divided into 3 zones and separated by a right-of-way. The Columbia River is home to the reactors that pose the main danger. The second zone belongs to the plant where the chemical components of the process take place. The third zone is also home to facilities that produce ancillary products. Hanford is called the complex for a reason. To the southeast of the manufacturing facility is the Tri-Cities agglomeration. It includes 3 towns, Richland, Pesco, and Kennewick. They are home to about 200,000 people. 10,000 work in manufacturing services. When it was planned to deploy the nuclear laboratory, it was stipulated that there would be no large settlements within a radius of 30 kilometers. And road and railroad tracks must stand 15 kilometers away from the complex. In just 2 years, production has grown to colossal proportions, thanks to funding and human capacity. The region is no longer a desolate wilderness, something the US government had probably forgotten. People were not alerted to the disaster looming at Hanford. Gaps in the nuclear belt. The nuclear lab was originally controlled by the Department of Defense, from which funding and guidance came. When the facility exceeded every conceivable size, it was placed under the jurisdiction of General Electric. The corporation was to be overseen by an established Atomic Energy Commission. From 1946 to 1963, production ramped up. The state ordered the corporation to build more and more reactors, and from 3, the number grew to 9. The reason for this accelerated rate of production was the confrontation between the 2 powers. The Pentagon devised a plan to attack the USSR called Dropshot. It required at least 250 warheads. To produce them, all the forces of the complex were directed. When a private corporation created a stockpile designed to destroy life all over the globe, the government decided to stop production. This was not in the owners' plans. They wanted to continue to increase the rate of production and increase the value of the product. There was a conflict of interest, which in the future led to this situation. The state stopped purchasing and began the process of winding down the project. One after another, the lines and reactors were shut down. The capacity was reduced. The last reactor existed until 1987 and was used as a banal power plant. USA, Hanford, an accident surpassing Fukushima. Private interests in the production ended, and they breathed a sigh of relief when the complex was handed over to the Department of Energy. Now it was necessary to dismantle it, which was very hard on the budget. In the second half, they began to develop nuclear power for peaceful purposes. But even in this case, a huge amount of waste appears, which is dangerous for people. To reduce the radioactivity, it was necessary to bury it at a depth of no less than 10 meters. Then they remembered Hanford and the huge number of underground tunnels located 10 meters deep. They were expanded and adapted for storing nuclear waste. Preliminary substances are given a glassy form, which is poured into iron containers. Railroad rails were laid in the tunnels, so the waste was stored in wagons for convenience. This way of storing waste was not only convenient, but also budget-friendly, which satisfied the interests of thrifty Americans. Expected threat. The disaster that occurred these days was the natural result of mismanagement and ill-conceived actions by the authorities. Hanford became the most voluminous storage facility for radiation substances. Initially, it was supposed to store medium-level radioactive waste, but since the 80s, high-level radioactive waste began to appear there as well. Currently, 204 cubic meters of glassy, high-radiation waste, housed in containers, are in storage. The iron containers, in which the toxic substances are encased, have a warranty period of 20 years. The first containers were long outdated and began to deteriorate. By 2012, about 2% of the poisonous substances had gone into the ground. The government made a pathetic effort to prevent the process of environmental contamination. The containers have undergone repackaging into double containers. But this cannot bring back the substances that have already penetrated into the soil. It should not be forgotten that the repository is on the bank of the river, and the waste, if it enters it, will spread over a huge area, carrying death. The beginning of the disaster. The depot had not been repaired for 25 years. At a gap of 50 square meters under the base of the railroad bed, a fracture appeared. This caused the vaults to collapse. The employees of the storage facility were trapped inside the tunnel. They were advised to take shelters and wait for help. Significant soil subsidence appeared above several tunnels. At the same time, nuclear waste is stored in railroad cars on the tracks. They emit a radiation background that is dangerous for people. Air got access to the storage, which spreads toxic substances for many kilometers. For 80 kilometers, the Columbia River flows through the territory of the complex. If the poisonous substances get into its waters, it would lead to a worldwide catastrophe. The river is navigable and has 14 dams and a large hydroelectric dam. More than 2.5 million people live along its banks. They work the land and labor on the river. The Columbia carries its waters to the city of Portland, which has a population of over 500,000 people. Currently, equipment has been used to determine that 4 containers are leaking. Information about the global ecological disaster is deliberately glossed over by the U.S. authorities. They seek to hide the facts and do not notify the population, do not take radical measures to eliminate the dangerous facility. Compared to Fukushima, this disaster is more devastating. It brings death to millions of people, and not only Americans. It is necessary to draw public attention to such deadly connivance of the authorities. The lives and health of millions of people, half of whom are children, will depend on it. Their future is at risk, and this must be known in order to force the authorities to take urgent action. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. Give it a thumbs up. Write in the comments about what else interesting you can tell about this video. See you in the new video.